I'm tired, and I don't want to write anymore. I don't care about the shit that came before me. This was for me, and as selfish as it sounds, I really need a break from all your doubt. I don't want to see a familiar face right now.
Welcome to My Comic Shop History. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. My Comic Shop History is a 10-episode podcast event that chronicles the rise and fall of New York comic book store alternate realities. Each week, I'll be speaking to past and present owners, customers, and employees about our experiences at the store. This week is a very special episode. It's the only episode not recorded at Alternate Realities. Instead, I'm in Manhattan at the home of Brandon Montclare, a former owner of the store who went on to enjoy success in the comic book industry as an assistant editor, freelance writer, and independent comic book creator. Brandon, welcome.
Hello. I'm the only one in this episode?
You are. Just
Wow,
you and me.
look at that. I thought I'd be, cut in a little bit here and there to something else you were cooking up. What's the name of our episode?
Well, since the title of your current series is Rocket Girl,
Right.
I was thinking we might call this one Rocket Man.
All right. At least it's not Rocket Girl. That's good.
No, you are the Rocket Man.
I guess so, right?
So we have a lot of things that I want to talk about. Obviously, we don't see you too often, so this is a chance for us to catch up.
Yeah.
But before we go back to your comic shop history and how you got involved with the store and all of that, I just wanted to get your take on the closing of the store. How'd you find out about it, and what was your initial reaction?
Steve had mentioned back in October, I saw him at New York Comic Con, that he was thinking about closing it up. And I think he said that before, a few times.
Yeah, once or twice.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere in my mind, I don't know that he was more serious about it, but, time kind of going on and this kind of what I know of the story, even though you said I'm not there too much often. It had some believability in it. I did think, like all other things, he'd just go month to month. He wouldn't sign a big lease. He'd stick around. But that was the first time, was in October. And then the announcement in February, which was a surprise, even though, like I said, he had mentioned it. So I don't know. I really heard about it like most people did, and was very surprised.
As far as, again, your role in the store as a former owner, is there any part of you who's concerned about the legacy that you would like it to continue because of the fact that you were so involved with it?
Yeah, my answer is no, and I think about that. Like, well, it was great, and I do always take pride because people say, "Oh, where's the store?" Because a lot of times you say you used to own a store, it means like it went out of business. You know what I mean? And it's somehow your fault. So in a professional setting, not that I just worked at a comic shop, but I owned a comic shop for a long time, I would always add in, and plus it's still going strong up in, Scarsdale, Alternate Realities. So, yeah, it's like, I should have pride, and I've taken pride in not just that the store is still there, but, whatever Steve has done to keep it going. But in a way, it's like, it's maybe it's over already for me. So, it's like you said, I don't get up there too often, and times change. So, yeah, so it's weird. I don't know why. I don't, maybe it's just some kind of psychological mix-up too. I should miss it, but I don't. But, it was a success. It was something I'm proud of, helping sustain and helping build. But it's time. Everyone gets. I moved on 10 years ago. Steve's allowed to move on now. That's for sure. The things that keep me away are the practical things. It's like I don't have a car. I'm never up in Westchester. My father still lives up there. My wife's parents still live up there, so like Thanksgiving, but maybe not Christmas, or you know what I mean. So I'm not really up there too often in general. But yeah, it's like it's just it's weird. It's like it's also the past for me, and I don't want to say I don't live in the past, because then people say that and it means a million things. But yeah, it's not something. Yeah, it's like it's just weird. It's like it's the nostalgia. The memories are good, but I don't want to go and kind of live there. Almost because it hasn't changed. You know what I mean? And I've changed so much. So it's just a reminder of like a life that I, have moved past. And again, why that bothers me, I don't know. It's not Steve's fault. It's not Alternate Reality's fault. It's just how I'm wired, I guess.
It's funny. You and Bill Mayo are on opposite ends. Bill, of course, is a
Yeah,
long
yeah, yeah.
time, former
yeah.
former employee,
Right.
who loves the store more
Yeah.
than maybe just about anybody. And
Yeah.
he, when
Yeah.
any chance he gets, he's there.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what it is. It would sound, pop psychology that I'm hiding something or avoiding something. I don't think so. But it's just like, it's like, I've moved on. My life is so different now. I've been married since I just graduated college, and now I'm 40. So it's almost, 20 years I've been married. I don't know, 16, 17 years. And people say, oh, how that must be hard, or you hear that all the time. And it's like, well, it's just, I'm a completely different person now than I was at 22, and so is my wife. But just kind of by luck, we remained compatible. I'm a completely different person now than I was at 19, owning alternate realities, but no longer no longer compatible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Will you go back to visit one last time before it closes?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess, and Steve and I get along. Over the years too, I sometimes think Steve's mad at me, and I'm sure, Steve's mad at everybody sometimes. So, is it just that, or is it, when the time is right? I don't want to go, make a big deal out of it. But I'll try. I'm in my head. I'm going to go and hit the store one last time.
Backing up now a bit, how were you first introduced to the store? How did your affiliation with alternate realities begin?
Yeah, I was a big fan of comics, and what you would do is just go to every comic book store, certainly. If a new one opened, and Alternate Realities was a pretty cool store. Dragon's Den was the oldest and the biggest, and Steve's store with Gene and Kevin was just a cool little store, and Dragon's Den suffered from being like the biggest, that it was a little bit, didn't have a personality, so I liked, alternate realities a lot. I was working conventions, kind of buying and selling stuff, but, ever since I was a little kid. So at some point, I would split tables with the guys at alternate realities, or we would do stuff. And, when they were getting into trouble, I guess after that first year or whenever it was, I simply bought in. Steve and I a couple times have disagreed on the terms of what I bought in, but as I recall, it was $6,250 for half the store. So, and again, this isn't the 40s, right? So it wasn't a lot of money then, and it's not a lot of money now.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, right.
And how old were you at this point?
19 when I bought into the store.
So were you in college, or had you not started yet?
No, I was in college. I was a terrible student in high school, but I was working. Like I really was. Would do monthly shows and do a lot of comic stuff, and knew Steve through that. But I was at Fordham. I was a very bad student in high school, so I started at night school at Fordham, and then transferred into day school, but that would have been after. That's kind of after Alternate Realities stabilized a little bit.
So I'm curious. So you buy into the store at a point where the store is struggling. The two of the co-founders are on their way out. So
Yeah.
what's kind of going through your head? Were you just confident enough that you could turn it around?
Yeah, definitely confident. And also, and I believe this today, and I believed it when I was 19, is that chaos is like a good thing. It's because you can get an opportunity. I worked at DC Comics for a while, and it's the antithesis of chaos. It's always so organized. And it's, you kind of sit and you wait your turn, and then you get your promotion, or you get a new book, or you get somebody to finally let you do something that you wanted to do. But before I worked at DC, I worked at Tokyo Pop, which was like the Wild West. And nobody, there was no, authority wasn't granted. It was assumed. I became in charge of submissions just because nobody else was doing it. And kind of at Alternate Realities, that that's kind of, and at 19, that's how I felt. I mean, it was like, well, the store's full of junk. We owe a lot of money. All the all the whole industry was suffering, though. It wasn't like Alternate Realities had done anything wrong. It just got sucked up with the implosion. We had a plan, and we did a lot of work. We just kind of liquidated a lot of stuff. Slowly but surely paid off. It was Heroes World Distribution, the main distributor at the time. And however long it took, maybe it was a year, maybe it was 9 months, maybe it was a little bit more than a year, we would pay, here's our weekly invoice plus a little bit more, just like anybody else trying to pay down a credit card. And I remember like, oh, we're finally done. And Steve was talking to the person, so that should bring us even. We've gotten rid of all the debt to the distributor. And the accounts manager said, yeah, you are one of 2 stores that are actually now current. So that's how bad the business was, right? And obviously Heroes World got snapped up by Marvel and led to an even bigger crash. But when you're 19 and you don't have a family to support, I don't know Steve's perspective at the time. He had put a lot of money into it, so he had to kind of hold on. But for me, I was working, so I was able to get most of the money I needed to buy in. I didn't need a salary to live on. So it was able to be kind of done. And in doing that, we did a lot of different things at the time, which were pretty, radical, because all these stores that you talk about, you'd walk in, and it would be back issues, and it'd be wall books, and it'd be everything else. But, you always make a lot of money on the new stuff. But trade paperbacks, like, we were really one of the first stores that I'd ever even walked into that had like a full line of all the DC backlists and all the Marvel backlists. Back then you could do it. And just kind of switching from, hey, wouldn't it be great if you got this next first appearance of Wolverine or something, to more of what you'd call like a blockbuster type of store, where it's like, hey, you just come in and you read, and it's geared towards readers and not collectors and people who kind of just get their value. They pay $2 for comics for $2 worth of entertainment, not to put it in a bag and a board.
I mean, Steve must have had a lot of confidence in you as this 19-year-old kid coming in to go 50-50 with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it, I don't know if it was, I like to say, oh, he had confidence in me. Maybe he did, which is great. I wonder now if it was, he figures, well, I'll be doing most of the heavy lifting anyway, or if he had other thoughts that he never shared with me. But it was a partnership, and when we both worked really hard, and the store did well, so not just, like I said, not just kind of survived, but eventually thrived. I think he was 38 and I was 19, so literally twice my age. And now I'm about the age that Steve was when he bought in. So could I do business with a 19-year-old? Maybe. I kind of stay active with a lot of younger people who are looking to do some kind of internship or something with the podcast. So, yeah.
That's right. We can plug your own podcast here. You do a podcast called Podcorn with artist Amy Reeder, right? What are the sort of things that you guys talk about?
Just comic stuff. It started, we did a Kickstarter for a creator-owned book we did called Halloween Eve before we did Rocket Girl together. And it was just like a Q&A. We'll do audio for it. Then we'll talk about books we liked. And it was a good response, and it's a good way to connect with fans, which is important. It's, not to jump off the podcast and back into alternate reality so soon, but Steve has such a great set of people who come in, but he doesn't have that kind of internet presence or people who can kind of, he's not on Twitter, the Facebook's kind of weak, but it's so much fun to do the podcast with Amy and, just to interact with the fans and just to kind of, even if they're just listening, even if it's not any kind of live back and forth, you get feedback. You see them at shows or at signings, and they're listening, or you get them tweeting about it or what have you. And it's really, it's a great way for outreach and a lot of fun. So
currently, where can people listen to it?
You can go to podcornpodcast.com. Again, we've been switching servers and stuff like that, trying to get the right mix, because we're going to kind of relaunch in a big way in May. But if you go to Podcorn Podcast, it's always, the new episodes are always there. So
it's funny, before we sat down to record, I was telling you a little bit about one of our former customers who opened his own comic book shop in Yonkers called The Spider's Web.
Right.
He'll be a guest on an upcoming episode. But he does a lot of those things that Steve doesn't, that you were just discussing. He has his own podcast. He is very active on Facebook and Twitter. He, post pictures of customers when they make a big purchase.
Nice,
he puts it on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good way to keep people engaged. He has 3 times the number of Facebook likes that Alternate Realities has.
Right. Even though Alternate Realities probably has 3 times the business, right?
Right. And has been around for 23 years. The store is a year, maybe 2 years old.
Yeah. Well, not to go too much on a tangent, but you talk about crowdfunding and Kickstarter. It's people ask me for advice a lot. Should I do this? Should I do that? The most important piece of advice sounds like very cliche, but it's like you got to do what you're good at. people want you to talk up in front of the camera and interact with them. But if you're really a wallflower and you're just going to be awkward, that's not good. So you have to find a different way to kind of, like I said, to present yourself and do what you're good at. And maybe Steve isn't the type of guy, to go on, social media in any sense, or to take the picture of the guy in the big purchase. But then you have to, in a store, going back to the first episode of your podcast, it's not a democracy, but it is. You know what I mean? It's a democracy, not even among owners and employees, but also with the fans, also with the publishers. I mean, Steve's in a business where he has an open line to Marvel and DC and Image. It may not seem like that all the time, but he's a big enough store that he can call up and kind of get someone's ear if he really wanted to. He could participate in a lot of different things. So Steve, maybe his personality is such that he has to be the captain of the ship. It has to be just him, and that's not an easy way to support comic stores anymore. You see the successful stores; they're the kind of the boutique place. People, they're destinations, right? I say this a lot, but alternate reality has kind of moved from the collector's hot back issues to Blockbuster, but now it is really like the corner bar, and the success he has is with that core of regular customers like you and everybody else who hangs out. But it has to cast a wider net. You have to have your entire customer base feel that way. At least I think. And you have to, other people's opinions count, and what they want to see in the store counts. It can't just be, this is my store, I've been here for 23 years, I'm going to do it my way. But that being said, it's not in Steve's personality to be open like that. So, this is maybe what you're seeing, the time to move on. Because I'm sure there's enough business and potential that someone else could take over the store, or Steve could take a partner. But, it just doesn't happen, and that's okay. I mean, Steve's earned the right to do it his way. He's earned the right to close the store. That's kind of, going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's okay to kind of be done with it, and it's okay to not have to change who you are to make the store a success, move on and do something else.
Jumping off of that notion of Steve as the captain, what was the working relationship like between the two of you?
Oh yeah, I mean, he was never, and he was never the leader. You know what I mean? It wasn't. I don't mean to be rebellious or anything else. We were definitely at worst equal partners. Steve probably always had the lion's share of hours, so he's in the store and he's kind of doing that stuff. But as far as trying new things, I think a lot of that did come from me, whether it's ordering differently or rearranging the store, which we used to do like once a year or twice a year. The cash register's here, we'll move it to the back, we'll move this to the front, we'll flip it over. I don't know if it's changed at all in the last I said, yeah. I mean, Steve doesn't even replace the neon when it breaks.
No, I mean the register. Yeah. So right now, when you walk into the store, the register is to the right, and that's where it's been for.
Yeah, since I moved. I hate to say it, since I moved it there. But that's fine. Like I said, it's not. I'm not trying to take any credit for the success. It's just personality. So at the time, Steve was permissive of that. Steve was a little bit more into the idea of a democracy, as he would say.
Speaking of your ideas of, again, rearranging the store and things along those lines, what are some of your business philosophies that you introduced to the store, and specifically any that might have conflicted with Steve's notions?
It's going to sound like a criticism of the current way things are, but trying to get a lot of bigger deals. I think I was more excited about that type of stuff. Like say, hey, let's go into Gundam models, and then all of a sudden we have a back room full of Gundam models. But at least it would be a messy back room as opposed to a messy front room. Again, carrying the graphic novels and just kind of having a destination to be for readers, I think, was something that was new to Steve. And so maybe that was me being young and having a new idea. But we did things together. Again, focusing on comics and maybe, I always try to limit some of the ancillary merchandise like toys and cards and whatnot. So Steve, in the first half of Alternate Realities was more into working with people. But by now it's not in his personality to do that as much. But you tell me, you're an employee. Is it employees always had a lot of latitude? I figured under every incarnation. Did you ever get yelled at for doing something different?
The closest I think I came to getting yelled at was Steve has a specific way of emptying the garbage.
Okay.
Which is he has the
Yeah.
white garbage bags in each pail, and
Uh-huh.
then what you're supposed to do is dump out the garbage into a large black bag and keep reusing that white bag for as long as you can. I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas my inclination would be to just grab the bag, throw it out,
Right.
and replace it.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely has specific ways of doing things,
Yeah.
even down to the garbage.
Yeah. Well, and again, people change. So I think he was a little more liberal in the early years of Alternate Realities. He's able to set aside his personality sometimes, but not others. I don't know how to unlock that mystery. Except to say that, again, I sound critical, but Steve's ran that business for 23 years, and it's been a success. And other stores have failed. And Steve is smarter than 99% of the other retailers out there, and has always made good decisions, and has always been conservative, and has always, not done something too crazy or something. His bad ideas are about garbage bags. It's not about maybe he over-orders stuff like anybody else, but nothing that has ever handicapped the store. I mean, reading that announcement, and as much blame as he did put on reservists who don't pick up their stuff. I mean, it's that he looks at that as a negative is very Steve. Because, I mean, just think of the mathematics of it, right? You have maybe 200 pull list customers. Comics you get a 50% discount, right? So, for every $100 you spend, you're getting $200 worth of retail back, basically. I mean, there's obviously other things you factor in. So if you have 200 pull list customers that you're doubling your money on every week, and you have 3 or 4 bad ones, that's still a tremendous asset. And he looked at it as a problem, you know what I mean? And and should he curb special orders of this, that? Maybe, or maybe not. But it's a personal affront to him. It hurts the business, but not in a big way. I mean, if you take, it's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. The pull lists, that's always a problem. People who kind of abandon their list. But if it's only 5 or 10%, and I can't imagine it was ever that high, because then your pull list would be gone in a year, right? That you're doubling your money on these 200 accounts, and if the bad part of that is a couple of people burn you, like a couple meaning 2, well, what difference does it make? It's a huge success. But Steve takes it personally, and it makes him angry. And again, people are human, and what affects them. It's not right to say pull something and not do it. But it's the offense that's the problem. It's not the business model. Steve's like that, Steve, a part of Steve doesn't like to lose, in a sense. Again, you could order, 100 copies of Watchmen that retails at $20, and you're paying $10 a pop, and you could sell 99 of them, right? And so you've almost doubled your money, but for that one, you've made so much money. And then he has the one that's left over right now. Suppose demand for Watchmen completely evaporated. If he sold that one for $9 instead of the $10, he'd lose sleep over it, because he lost $1 on that one copy that's left over, but not looking at the entire transaction of being, well, you sold 99, you've doubled your money already, you've got to liquidate. That's why he puts stuff in storage rather than get rid of it. And then you start, you should start calculating storage costs and everything else. But Steve looks at it as kind of, why should I give it away now? It'll be worth money one day, or why do it? And, it's kind of, I got to imagine it's more of a personal thing than it's actual, an analysis of a way to do business.
Very much so. And, it's interesting. Everyone asks now, what is Steve going to do that the store is closing?
Right.
His current plan is to move whatever stock is left at the end of June
Right.
to storage and to sell it piece by piece on eBay.
Right.
And he's very specific that he has started to have some discounts at the store, but he's not planning to really discount things too much because, again, his feeling is people didn't buy this before.
Right.
I'm not going to sell it to them cheaper now. And so he would rather, spend the time and money to store these things and sell them on eBay, where at best he's selling them at a discount. I mean, some of these things might not even move, and if they do, it's certainly not going to be for full retail.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just not the way that the business is anymore. There's so much new product. You can't have the attitude anymore where I'm just going to sit on it and wait to get my price because the realities of the business have changed, so the value of that overstock is really less than it's ever been. Like, you say, you drive a car off the lot and it's worth half what you just paid for it. Comics, there's no such thing as kind of this valuable backstock that eventually somebody will want. To kind of believe in that is to believe in the collector's thing. Well, I'm not going to blow these books out for a quarter because maybe someday someone's going to really care about the first appearance of Shotgun in Punisher #6 or something stupid like that. So I might as well hold on to it. This is just old product, like old 8-tracks or something. It's got very little kind of value, and to me, you got to start calculating the cost of storing the stuff and everything else. But
speaking of calculating, AR Legend has it that you once calculated how much it cost for an action figure to occupy its space on the wall. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I didn't invent that. There's a lot of retail principles about sales velocity and turnover and how much you could do it, but again, we talk about a Watchmen trade paperback or a Dark Knight Returns trade paperback, and you're getting 50% off. So it's a $20 book you're paying $10 for. Figures aren't that nice. You don't get the same discount. You get the $20 deluxe DC action figures costing you $13. So already you're paying more money for it. Shelf space costs money, right? Everything costs money. If you have the right side of the store is new comics and trade paperbacks when you walk in. Well, that half of the store is costing the same amount of rent as the left-hand part of the store. So if you look at, hey, this one trade paperback with maybe full facing takes up the same amount of space as a trade paperback, as an action figure. Okay, well, here's the comic. We've sold, 100 issues of this every week, and then we replace it with the next issue, and that sells. And you have so much turnover that one little space on your wall is making you X dollars, and then you look at the action figures collecting dust on the other side of the wall, which have less of a discount. And you say, look, carrying action figures in that type of store with the rent as high as it is in Scarsdale, New York, you're losing money. And I think I did work out the calculation to it, and it's it's easier than you think because you just do wall space, and I don't know. I don't know what the reaction was. I don't remember. You tell me. You say it's legendary because I was so right, or I was so goofy, and people thought I had two heads.
No, the former.
Yeah, and it really was that it's like to carry that stuff you're losing money. Steve doesn't want to lose money on a statue, so he's going to put it in storage forever. Well, you're paying money on that storage. You're probably better off liquidating it and freeing up cash flow. It's one of the reasons I kind of left, though, as much as I appreciated those kind of business philosophies, not to sound so highfalutin, but alternate reality has kind of hit its head on the ceiling of the most you could kind of do, not as a small business, but as a mom and pop type business, where it's like, okay, we get this much product in, we sell that much product. We started to get tastes of making real money and kind of upping cash flow with Pokemon and with a couple of other import stuff that we were doing really well with, wholesaling to other stores and also selling through alternate realities. But it really became like, well, the only way to really get better is to think more about financing, to think more about upping cash flow, to open up more stores and run it kind of more like a Wall Street guy would run a business. It doesn't matter what you're selling, It's kind of upping the numbers and generating cash, which, in a way wasn't interesting, in a way was kind of scary because maybe I was in my mid-20s. And so one of the reasons I left is because it was just like, that was kind of what I saw on the wall as the only way you can make alternate realities better was to start really thinking about different ways of financing stuff and changing the way you do business and how you're going to pull out your profits from not just selling a book, but also, like I said, having a revenue stream, having cash flow. I don't know what Steve's bottom line is now. Obviously, if he was making millions of dollars, he would still be in business, or someone else would, you'd make a buyout work. That being said, there's so much opportunity in Westchester, and I look at it, wow, what does it mean for comics that kind of market is going to have this one store that really is the only store worth going to, and then in an entire market is just kind of closing up shop, and then I'll sell the overstock on eBay. I mean, it's like, I don't even look at it as a reflection of alternate realities. I worry about it as a reflection of the health of the comics business. But then you look at the comics and you say, well, look at the movie theaters, and everyone's looking for Avengers and everything else. So it's like, well, people still want the characters in a big way, but comics, it's tough. So
When you sold out that final time,
Right.
was there any part of you that thought, oh, maybe I'll come back at some point, or did you know at that point that was it?
at that point, I disagreed with how Steve had treated not just me but his partners. I wasn't angry. I just thought it was like, for all the things that we've always been through, all right, Steve, you're upset. So you're upset. Let's talk about being upset. You don't have to kind of, be so angry that you're agreeing to do one thing and then doing another, or if you feel that you're being kind of taken for granted, or that you should, be given more latitude, kind of let's talk about it, and I don't mean just between he and I, between the whole group. And so the fact that Steve was having none of that, it was kind of like, again, not angry, but you throw your hands up, you know what I mean? It's like, all right, Steve, you're going to be that way. You know what? It really is Steve's store. It's always been Steve's store. If that's the way you want it, that's the way you're going to do it. So I certainly, at that point, didn't think I'd ever come back in again, and I didn't. But I think at that point, Steve probably said in his head, "I'm never going to work with a partner again," and he hasn't.
And he hasn't.
Yeah. So, there was a small degree of personal conflict, but everything's forgivable. I don't know. Rich Roney says that Steve never forgets, and Steve says Steve never forgets, and it's true. But I think almost everybody has been forgiven for whatever they've done. I'm sure there are some people who are dead to Steve, but
Yeah, most people have come back from the dead
exactly.
at least once.
Exactly. Well, the Odoisms are new. I don't know if there were no Odoisms. He adopted those later. There were no Odoisms in 1996, as far
I
as
think
I know.
we kind of egged him on
Yeah.
a little bit,
There you go.
or a lot.
There you go.
If you were to own a store today, not even necessarily alternate realities, but if
Right.
you were to own a comic book shop, or even if someone just came to you for advice, in light of the changes that the industry has undergone, what sort of advice would you give?
You have to make it a destination. You have to make it a fun place for everybody to go to, not just your idea of a place that it is. Not because you're wrong, or not because there's a better way, or just you need that much traffic. You need to have artists come in. You need to have people really feel invested. You have to have great employees. It's kind of all the basic stuff. But people love comics so much that you'll get somebody good at $10 an hour or $15 an hour to really be an advocate for comics. You have to read everything. I mean, so many times I hear like these curmudgeonly creators too. Oh, I don't have time to read comics anymore. You have to know, why people like, Saga and everything else down the road. And to keep people excited, you have to be a constant cheerleader for stuff. And yeah, it's like kind of like it's the marketing that goes on within your store is is overlooked in a lot of places. But you see the successful places, that's what they're doing. And that's really what's happening. It's the big stores are getting bigger, and the smaller stores are now suffering. It's engaging with creators and publishers. And publishers Valiant will do outreach, Image will do outreach, DC will still do outreach, Marvel's a little bit tough. But, you can't be the downer, oh, they're going to, I hate digital comics, or I hate relaunches, or I hate anything else. You have to focus on what you like and what other people like, and just be a super cheerleader, because people love comics. I mean, people like walking. I mean, I live 2 blocks from Forbidden Planet, which does business 100% the right way. And, a lot of T-shirts, a lot of those, what are those big head things? Those, not bobbleheads, but
Oh, those pop figures?
yeah.
Oh, I love those.
Exactly. See, everyone does. And you say, "Oh, it's a great gift." Oh, even if you don't know anybody, oh, but he liked Star Wars, or he liked Guardians of the Galaxy, or he liked Wizard of Oz, so I can get this little Tin Man one, and he can put it on his desk. T-shirts and merchandise. It's kind of going back to that, where you just have to be. I hate to say it, a pop culture experience, but that's why conventions are doing so well too. It's people want to be a part of the community. They want to be able to talk to me and Amy Reeder on Twitter, and they can. So you have to be facilitating that as a store, I think.
It's really interesting to talk to you about a lot of this, because a lot of the things that you've identified make me feel that maybe this is the right time for Steve to step away, because
Right.
again, he does use Facebook, but it's usually to, blast the customers.
Yeah, exactly.
And even as far as, making the store a destination, I mean, certainly for his hardcore regular group of customers, it is. And for those of us who are part of the community and we go out to dinner, it is. But even for us, I mean, we don't necessarily find the store always a pleasant place to be. I mean, it is very messy and cluttered. And, Steve and I talked about this on the first episode. He, that doesn't bother him. He
Right.
considers that clutter to be, discovery, an opportunity for discovery. But I do question if, a young person comes in or a female customer comes in,
Right.
how would they take it in?
Yeah.
Is it somewhere that they would consider a destination and want to go all the time?
Yeah, but it goes back to what I was kind of saying before. You can't fake it, and certainly not, when you're 60 years old and you've worked 100 hours a week for the last 23 years. I mean, why should Steve have to fake it? He's perfectly happy closing up. He's not saying, "Oh my God, I wish I didn't have to." He's ready to move on. It's not Steve's fault, and I think Steve recognizes he could do things differently, but doesn't want to, and he's very happy with his business model. And again, the business model isn't. Time's passed it by. I guess you could say it that way. Maybe Westchester's passed it by. Maybe, like I said, these rents have kind of passed it by. And if Steve was 19 buying in like I was, maybe he'd have more energy to try to reinvent a way to make it work where you can have that kind of dirty boxes and treasures that you find. Steve could change if he had. You put a gun to his head. Like I said, Steve's smarter than almost anybody else out there. You put Steve on a desert island, and the only way you can survive is by making a comic shop. I'd pick Steve over a lot of other people. Except for the fact that Steve might, just wander off into the surf, right, and just kind of end it all. You know what I mean? But if Steve had to, be compelled to be a success, I would take Steve over almost anybody that I've met in this business who owns a shop. So
You occupy a unique space within our cast at Alternate Realities, in that you left the store and you went on to have these different roles within the comic book industry, which I think is something that a lot of us and comic book fans in general, might aspire to. So I guess first, what are some of the different roles that you've had on that side of the industry?
I was very involved with conventions, always going to conventions, and always a big fan. So I came back to New York and I met with Bob Schreck, who I knew at conventions. I was like, "Can I just come and pick your brain, because I'm going to be moving back, and I'm interested in an editorial position. So can I get the temperature of what it's like at DC at the time?" And he said, "Sure, come on by, we'll talk." And just during that meeting, he says, "Well, I have an opening, and I want you to have it." And they had something like 200 applications at DC, and I got the offer. And then decided to work at DC, where I worked just because I worked with Bob Schreck on some great stuff, like All-Star Superman and Batman Year 100. I worked on the regular Bat Office stuff. Moved up to Vertigo, worked on Hellblazer, worked on Sweet Tooth, was the first editor, worked with Lemire and stuff like that. And that was great. And DC is, again, it wasn't the Wild West. It was very rigid. They say DC is a good place to end a career, not to start it. Not in a negative way, like you get fired, but once you're established, that's the place to be, because they treat their employees very well. There's not a lot of stress. You have tons of resources, because DC Comics only cared about, making comic books, because the Superman lunchboxes and the Batman cartoon and everything else made so much money for Warner Brothers that they just left comics alone at the time. That's changed a little bit in the last couple of years. So, just hitting my head, and not, I had too many books that I was editor of for my position. So we have to promote you if you're editing 6 books, which I was doing, or 4 books, whatever it was. But we can't promote you because there was a hiring freeze at the time because there was a transition. And my daughter was about a year old. And I said, oh, I don't, my wife's on tenure track and that should work out. What do I need to stay here at DC working 9 to 5? Let me kind of go off and enjoy the freelance life. And I've written a few things now and working on a book called Rocket Girl for Image, which is doing well, and another Image book coming out at the end of this year, and some odds and ends. So, it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, that's about it. It's a long way of putting it, but I've done just about everything, right? So.
And what did your duties involve as an assistant editor at DC? What does an assistant editor do?
It sounds corny, but you assist. When I was there, they had gone from teams to like it would be an editorial group, and then DC. Literally, the day I got there wasn't because of me. It was just because when I got there, the math worked out. They split into 2-person teams, senior and junior man, basically, which was really interesting because, like, especially working for Shrek, it was all good stuff. And instead of being one of like 3 or 4 editors in the bat office as a junior person, it was just me and Shrek, and we'd sit together and we'd see what we wanted to do. And after I left, they kind of went back to that system as well. But it's not correcting things people think. Oh, you have to, you're doing hard editing, like correcting how Biff, Pam, and Bauer are spent. It's hiring the right people. It's managing talent. It's kind of it's brand management in the sense if you're working on Batman or something like that. Like what are the goals of the publisher, and make sure that those kind of don't get derailed as it's going. But it's hiring artists and writers and making sure you kind of get the best out of them. Learning about what makes them tick to motivate them. Some need the carrot, some need the stick. Putting out good stuff, and you're also, as an editor, you're the hub for absolutely everybody. Anything that needs to go to the creators goes through you. But if marketing needs art, they're going to come to you. If sales wants information, they're going to come to you. If publicity is saying, oh, we have to, coordinate, or even you're just going to publicity saying, listen, I have this person available for an interview. So you touch just about everything being an editor, which is very much the same as owning a small business. I think it was owning alternate reality was a lot. You do everything. Like I said, you take out the garbage, you ring customers up, you do the orders, you do a bit of everything. You're the go-to person as an editor, but it's basically just working with talent. It's talent management, and making sure pages go from the penciler to the inker to the colorist, and etc. Hopefully on time.
Speaking of talent management, I know there were a few people who you discovered and or nurtured a bit. I mean, do you want to talk about some of those finds of yours?
Yeah, I think that's how you measure success. And I don't want to, and I'm always very careful to say that I don't take credit for Amy Reeder's success. She did her part, which was knocked it out of the park. I did my part, which is sent her up to the plate, to use baseball. But worked with Jeff Lemire on his kind of first mainstream stuff. Amy Reeder, who I work with now, a big artist. Shane Davis kind of had his first regular gig working with him. And some of the most fun is working with people who you don't do anything with, like working with Frank Whiteley, who's become, who I'm friendly with. It's just great. You don't tell him how to draw. You wish you could tell him to get the stuff in on time, but that doesn't really work either. So it's just having a relationship with people and trying to keep them motivated and happy in your little part. But again, you're just along for the ride. Like All-Star Superman, a brilliant book. There was no editing done. There's nothing changed. There's hardly any. I can literally think of 1 or 2 little things that didn't translate because Grant is Scottish instead of American, and like saying like changing a half of a balloon. But just so much fun to work on. So much fun to see the script the plot coming in, the script coming in, the rough art coming in, the finished art, the final dialogue, and to be on a book that's I don't know. I know you're a Superman fan. I don't know if you like All-Star or not.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. I could go on all day. I loved editing. Hope to edit again. Love editing at DC because you can pay people, a good rate, so you can get the best, or you can get somebody young, but it's actually going to be kind of their first professional gig. And it's great to work on. And to me, that's like the ultimate fan thing. It's almost like saying, wouldn't it be great if Wolverine fought Black Panther, right? Well, wouldn't it be great if you had, Frank Miller write something and Jim Lee draw it, or however it comes down. that editing, you have to be in an office 9 to 5 kind of worked against me, but also just like I said at the time, things were just so clogged at DC. It was just time to leave and kind of move on.
Well, had you stayed, then you would have been faced with the prospect of moving to California.
Yeah, right. If I had stayed, till now. So there you go.
I'm sure people probably ask and have asked you this all the time, but when people come to you and ask, how do I break into the comic book industry? What do you normally tell them?
You just, what I normally tell them is, luckily, it's not rocket science, right? So if you really want to break into comics, you probably will. You might not be the next Neil Gaiman if that's what you want, but if you want to work, a lot of people want to break in as editor, and that's, if they want to work at Marvel or DC, you want to work in editorial. But maybe you'll work in marketing, maybe you'll work in legal, maybe you can work anyplace else, and you can still be part of the comics business. And the comics business is so small that even if you're doing contracts, you're actually an important part of the comics business. But if you want to be on the creative side, most people, that desire only stays with them if they actually have kind of the talent to ultimately make it. But you have to be patient. It might take 3 years, it might take 5 years, it might take more than that. But if you're, it's just perseverance, really, because it's, people will help you, right? Because everyone who's in the comics business had somebody help them get in. So there are a few assholes out there, but for the most part, it's, people will help, and people will kind of open the door for you, and people will say, okay, I'm going to give you a chance, or I'll stick up for you. But it just takes time, and obviously you got to get better. It depends on, what, if you want to be a writer, or if you want to be on the creative side. Your craft has to be there, but you also have to network. You also have to kind of become a student of the business, right? You can't just say, oh, I want to draw, give me a job. You have to understand. You just have to start reading a lot of comics and say, oh, this editor kind of matches what I do, or this publisher kind of matches what I do. You find where you fit, and then, you network online, you network at conventions, because what people really are surprised at is that you're going to be hired because somebody wants to work with you, not because you have a good idea. And I'll explain that. You're not going to get your first gig because you're a writer and you had the best idea for Hawkman that anyone's ever heard. So here is your Hawkman series. Go for it. You're going to be somebody who you hung out with at conventions. Maybe you did some self-publishing. Maybe you worked for a smaller publisher. You could talk about the Hawkman, and the editor could think, wow, that's the greatest Hawkman idea I've ever heard. But then in the back of the editor says, well, Hawkman, he's doing this other thing. This other creator has him. Who knows? Who blah, blah, blah. The first gig you're going to get is an assignment. It's going to be, like I said, it wasn't the first thing published, but the first gig I got from Marvel was an 8-page backup with Korg. And they said, hey, we're doing, it's Hulk, and we're doing all the different monsters in Hulk, and you get, and I need someone to do an 8-pager on Korg. I said, that sounds awesome. And I didn't even know who the hell Korg was. It's like, it's like the actor. Do you know how to ride a horse? Yeah. Korg was an alien who was, he looks kind of like the Thing, and was in Journey into Mystery, the first Thor. He was one of the aliens that fought all that. So I said, oh, that's cool. So I'll come up with an 8-page story. I didn't pitch Chaos King that I did with Kaluta. They said that we need a Chaos King story. So your early gigs are going to be, I want to give Brandon a chance. I want to give Anthony a chance. I want to give Jane Doe a chance. So where can I put them? And so you just have to kind of network and be ready. Also, meeting people in the business, even more important throughout your career, are your peers. You have really good relationships with, because you all kind of rise together. And if somebody rises a little faster, maybe it's the first time saying, oh, you know what, I can't take that Hawkman gig. I'm too busy. But you should give it to my friend Brandon, who's really good and looking for more work. And so you really have to network with your own, like I said, your own kind of level in the business. Not your own age group, because everyone's different ages, but your own experience level. And those are, I think, when you look at it, I've been able to observe it now, being in it long enough. And yeah, I mean, people who are important to people who've been in the business for 30 years are people who've been with them the entire time. So
as we've touched on, you moved on to the writing side.
Right.
Was that something that you always wanted to do, or was that a function of seeing all these scripts and thinking you wanted to try your hand at it?
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing wrong. A lot of people join editorial with a goal to get onto the creative side, and it really is a great experience. Cliff Chang, as an artist, did it. Tons of writers have done it. It's perfectly legitimate. Now, it's funny because I always was just loved editing so much, and that's all I wanted to do. I was kind of simpatico with Bob Schreck on that. It's like, no, I really, I'm not here trying to get a stepping stone so one day I can, be lucky enough to write the next issue of, Suicide Squad or something ridiculous. I loved editing so much. It was just a matter of going freelance. So I never had that kind of burning desire where I had to write, where I have to write to kind of clear my head. I kind of approach it in a technical way, much like I would working on alternate realities,
I want to talk about Rocket Girl specifically.
Cool.
So how did this project come to be?
Kickstarter was kind of new, and we did this book called Halloween Eve by the seat of our pants, but Image picked it up quick and was also able to publish it. So because that had done well, we were looking to do something now more longer form, and we wanted to do it with Image and et cetera, et cetera. And we went through a lot of ideas, and Amy wasn't digging any of them until and I used Rocket Girl. I'm like, oh, you can't just do a book and call it Rocket Girl, meaning I was trying to think of like, you can't just have a concept. It's not like we have the luxury of doing Spider-Man where you're going to have 100 issues that came before you and 100 issues that come after you, and the kind of character is already set. It has to be something that people can kind of understand and the story behind it. It can't just be Batman or Wonder Woman or Rocket Girl. And then Amy, in her way, is like, oh, Rocket Girl, what's that? And it wasn't anything. It was just kind of a generic superhero-y, comic booky sounding word. And, not the way you usually create something, but we were able to reverse engineer a story behind it. It's about a teenage cop who goes back in time from the future to New York in the mid-'80s to solve a crime by this corporation that's kind of been messing with the time stream, which is
Crimes Against Time.
Crimes Against Time, which is, obviously not the first time that kind of story has been told. The twist of it is that what she comes from is the present day, right? It started in 2013, but she comes from 2015 that has flying cops and teens with laser guns and jetpacks and everything else. So what happened to the time? Like, why are we living in the world we're in today when we're supposed to have this kind of 80s vision of the future that you got in Blade Runner or in Akira or in Back to the Future, right? Which I think is this year, right? Back to the Future just kind of passed, where it's like
right.
Back to the Future 2 came, and it's like, oh, hey, how come we don't have the hoverboards and everything else? So that's kind of the impetus of it. But yeah, so something I always wanted to do was kind of an 80s period piece, and I knew Amy would eat that up. The Image model, you own everything, and you just pay a little bit of a fee to cover solicitation. You pay your printing bill, and you own the rest of it. But Amy and I make more money on Rocket Girl, on an issue of Rocket Girl, than she did on Batwoman, than I do on the Hulk, and that's amazing because we're not. Rocket Girl's not the top seller. We're not the top talent necessarily working at Image or anyplace else. But, the way we kind of set it up was with the Kickstarter, with how well Image was doing, we said, well, we could probably make about 2/3 of our rate and do it and own everything. And I think anybody in the world who can make 2/3 of their DC rate but then do something that they want to do, their own book, would jump at the opportunity. But we kind of blew that, we blew that number out of the water and are, like I said, making a lot more money now.
As I said before we sat down, I just read the first arc and really enjoyed it. Fun,
Thank you.
Fast-paced, humorous. It was a really good time, and the listenership for this podcast is a fraction of yours. But for those who are listening, I really hope you do check out Rocket Girl.
Yeah. Thank you. It's like I said, it's a blast to work on. It's so much fun to be able to work in comics. It's everyone's living the dream if you're doing this stuff. And like I said, for alternate realities, I guess it's, what is the dream's a nightmare? I don't know. Is Steve that unhappy doing it for 23 years? Again, he's got to be getting his kicks also, right? I'll end with a qualification. Anytime in this interview that I sounded critical, it's, I'm not there every day. I don't know what's happening. I haven't been there in a long time, but it was a huge part of so many people's lives. It's a huge part of Rocket Girl, as silly as that sounds. But it's, I'm sure you would agree that's been more than a small part of your life. And, it's always been Steve's story, even though I was an owner there, even though I take pride in what I've done. It's always been, It's always been a reflection of Steve, and you know, we'll see what happens next, right? What's he gonna do with the website? What's he gonna do with alternaterealities.com? Is he gonna keep it? He's gonna keep the domain.
I think he's going to keep it. I mean, he's
Nice.
spoken about selling. I mean, obviously on eBay, but also selling at conventions. So I think the intention is to keep the AR name going in
Right.
some way, shape, or form.
And what do you get any feedback from what are the readers going to do? Are they going to, they're going to go to Yonkers? They're going to wait till they're in the city? They're going to go digital?
I don't
Mail
know.
order?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not there on, a regular basis anymore. I mean,
Right.
Steve has told me that a number of them have said that they would quit comics,
Right.
in part because of the store closing, as well as the, current changes at DC and Marvel, both of them undergoing
Right.
reboots or things along those lines. Whether or not they, these readers will actually follow through with that, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure as with anything, it'll be a mix. Some might not read anymore. Some might find a new store. Some might order trades on Amazon. I think it'll be a mix.
Yeah. And so it's a shame for comics because, Steve does decent business, I'm sure, still. I haven't looked at his numbers in a long time. He doesn't order a lot of Rocket Girl, but what are you going to do? It's crazy because people who have looked into these things, that is a phenomenon. When stores close, people just stop collecting. And when new stores open, people just start. I mean, it's not like they necessarily cannibalize. That was one of the incentives for opening a new store, that it seems to be that new stores generate new customers. So...
Well, it's been a blast chatting with you. We
thanks.
don't get to talk too often, so this has really been great.
Yeah.
And, you are our celebrity guest.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm the best that Alternate Realities can do.
No, not at all. We're honored. But I mean, I'm sure. I hope that there are fans of Rocket Girl out there or other things that you've written who might tune in to hear from you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, it's always fun, always doing this stuff. We'll have to have you on Podcorn when we're fully live, and so keep a Wednesday night, free.
Oh, I'd be honored.
Okay, cool.
So, well, once again, thank you very much for being on the show.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of fun.
All right, thank you, Brandon. To those who have listened, thank you for checking out this episode of My Comic Shop History. Be sure to tune in for future episodes. Don't be a flat squirrel.
I don't